Okay. Welcome to Encore, the show for and about Encore entrepreneurs by the Encore Entrepreneur Institute. We were formerly Speak Up World under the Blab IM handle, but we're always here now under Encore Entrepreneur to discuss entrepreneurship for those ages 50 and up. And if you're younger than that, stay tuned. You might just learn something too. I want to welcome our special guest for today, our guest star, Tina Hanline.
Hello.
She is an attorney who specializes in intellectual property law, trademark, and copyright. And Tina, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I am so glad to have you. And I have to tell you, one of the things that really prompted this show was I was interviewing a couple of entrepreneurs, and it seems like counterfeiting is so huge. Like, they'll have a brilliant idea and they'll put all their money and time into it to develop it. And as soon as it takes off or gets some sort of publicity, China copies it almost exactly and then puts it out there, and no one can tell the difference. And now this person who's put their life savings almost into this and their heart and soul into this, they're losing thousands to millions of dollars.
Right.
So I'm wondering, like, what is the biggest thing that a small business can do to try to stop illegal counterfeiting of their product?
Well, there's a couple things. I know a small business feels like they're helpless in the situation because typically, they don't have the big resources that larger companies have. But there is a proactive approach that small businesses can take in order to protect their brands. I have a list of a couple of things that I want to, recommend that in order to protect their brand, starting off with being proactive. If you go on eBay, Amazon, these large retailers, it's crazy how much you can see that there's infringement and counterfeit goods on these websites. A lot of these websites use almost like a hands-off approach. You have to be the one that's proactive to look at these sites and seeing that they're not an authorized retailer of my goods. That's not an authorized use of my product. And they have takedown mechanisms to take these things down from the websites, but you have to tell them, listen, I'm the owner of this brand, this invention, and I'll get to that in a second, but this is an unauthorized sale of my good. That I don't know if this is an legitimate product. You can do a track purchase, which in my experience was done frequently when I worked at DuPont with Kevlar products, where we would purchase these products from who, obviously an unauthorized we know who sell our products. We purchased it, tested it, and saw that this product was a counterfeit good using our trademark. So that's something I recommend, that if you see these goods, that's proof that they're counterfeit. That's ammunition in your belt that you can use against these infringers. What I said earlier about owning the product or owning the brand, you need to register your intellectual property. That's a huge, huge part of protecting against infringement, counterfeiters, and having ownership in your product. The number one for me, and that's my specialty, is trademarks. Yes, patents are important. Yes, copyrights are important, but trademarks are really the, bread and butter of your brand. That is how it's marketed in commerce. That is how consumers and wholesalers recognize your brand as your brand. It's how you, differentiate Godiva from Hershey from M&M's. Mm-hmm. They all brand their products differently so you know where they come from. So my number one thing before you do anything, and I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, is to register your trademark. That is the absolute number one thing you need to do. I recommend registering it, and this is where an attorney will come in. I have some tips on that as well. I know sometimes hiring an attorney can be a daunting and expensive process, and there are some ways around that, which I will get to. But that's when an attorney can really be helpful, is filing for these trademarks, not only in the United States, but where you ultimately sell your goods. If you're selling your goods, yes, the internet kind of complicated this a little bit, But if you're ultimately the largest markets you have are the United States, and you sell a little bit in China, to protect your IP, it's probably smart to have your trademark registration also in China. I think that if you have your trademark registered in China, you have the ability to enforce those rights in China. Actually, the largest, as you mentioned, the largest places that infringement and counterfeiting occur are in China and in Hong Kong. Those are the two largest, and it costs the economy almost $250 billion a year.
Wow. That's I can believe that. Now,
Yeah.
Going the legal route is obviously costly for any company, especially smaller ones. And
Absolutely.
we've heard of many small companies giving up. And I know the one entrepreneur that I'm thinking of, basically her daughter just happens to be an attorney, and that's her full-time job, is going on the internet and finding these counterfeiters and asking the internet to take them down. But it's a cyclical process. It's constant. As soon as they take it down, they put it back up in a different name. So how do they know? How hard is it? I mean, it must be difficult to fight China, because if you look at the luxury brands, for example, when they have the money to fight, they're basically have been losing this battle. So
Right.
How does a small company know when to keep fighting or when to call it quits? And can they ever win?
It's a cost-benefit analysis for sure. There's two things you could do in order to protect your brand internationally. Once you have your trademark, you can register that trademark with a custom agency. Mm-hmm. You're basically educating the customs agency, saying, when your products go worldwide, when you're shipping them and they're exporting, importing, all that, this is what you need to look for, my brand. I have this indicator. This is the stitching. These are authorized resellers and distributors. If they don't come from this authorized list, they might not be they may not be good goods. So that's something that those are more on the steps of being proactive rather than reactive. Being reactive is where the challenge gets difficult in issuing those cease and desist letters. You're right. It's cyclical. You can have, and on the bright side, you don't always need an attorney to enforce a cease and desist letter, or to write a letter to the company saying, this is my mark, I own it under this, and that. It's when it escalates, which likely it will. And counterfeiters, they know what they're doing is wrong from the get-go. And going the civil route, the civil law route, that is, not most of these, counterfeiting is a criminal thing. Mm-hmm. There are criminal financial penalties, depending on what the product is. There's even jail involved. That's the real deterrent. The civil action, it's costly, it's lengthy, it's, and yes, that's where the money comes in, is trying to actually fight these things in court, getting the injunction, obtaining the legal, and that's where, unfortunately, counsel's necessary, because you can't really fight these things on your own in court. There are, like I said, the cease and desist letters are things that you can do on your own as a business. You can educate consumers on what to look for in these products. That's also helpful on websites like eBay and Amazon, where you can, educate your consumers as to what your brands look like, or what to look out for, or who your authorized resellers are. Because you're almost creating an army of counterfeit searchers. It's not just you anymore. It's your consumers as well. It's your brands. It's your distributors and your wholesalers. You want your distributors to know, this is what our product looks like. Educate them too. You want as many eyes and ears out as possible, protecting, because at the end of the day, it's a liability issue. So you don't want. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, well, the one thing I've noticed is that they're so good at duplicating that even sometimes the owners of the patent or the invention can't hardly tell the difference between their own product and the counterfeiting product. They're really that good at it.
And sometimes that's where knowing who and where your goods are being sold by is important. It's not only knowing what your, secret indicators are on your goods, it's also knowing who is actually authorized to sell them. And that's almost, I think, a way to, as the name of the talk is, bulletproofing your business. Have a very limited amount of people that sell your business, not in a way where it limits or hinders your business being profitable, but really develop those relationships carefully. There's, you want to police your products in a way that it allow you to know who's selling your goods. You want to know the face behind your product other than your own. So I recommend that. Right. It's hard to protect the products when they're so good at counterfeiting. I'll never forget, we did a trap purchase, and on its face, it looked real. And, we're like, oh, I don't know. So we would and obviously DuPont's a Fortune 50 company. So we have labs who test all these things and everything. So the resources were different, but even then it was a never ending battle because, you type Kevlar, it wasn't even a counterfeiting issue half the time. A lot of the time it was just an infringement issue. And that's and that might be a topic for another day, but it's a similar route, a similar goal, is saying, you're going to ruin my trademark by saying Kevlar as a bulletproof vest is just simply Kevlar, instead of saying, this bulletproof vest is made with Kevlar. There's people just calling the good Kevlar, and it's, generalizing your trademark.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go back to the cease and desist letter a little bit, because you're saying that owners of these companies can actually, if you have a small business, basically you can write your own cease and desist letter. What needs to be in that when they write that? Of course, we want to tell them to stop, but what important parts of the letter need to be in there if we're going to write our own letter? Absolutely.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, it's important to own the mark that you're trying to defend.
Mm-hmm.
There are such things as common law rights. The law does protect you if you're using these products in commerce and not own a registered trademark. However, that's a little difficult to enforce. If someone else owns it, they owned it before you, they could come against you. You want to make sure you have that on paper as a federally registered trademark. That's really, that's number one. I have this registration in this country. This is the number. This is the date it was registered. I predate your use from what I'm seeing. Please cease and desist this use of this trademark as it's infringing on my rights. If you don't need to cite law, it's not going to scare anybody. They want to know that sometimes they know what they're doing, and other times they don't realize that they're infringing on your mark. A lot of the times they do. A lot of the times they're doing it maliciously. But I remember I had one specific case where there was a trademark that came up that they were trying to file for this application. It didn't really apply. Like, it was close to ours, and it was not malicious at all. They just didn't realize we were in that market too. So we sent the cease and desist, and we ended up actually coming to an amicable resolution on how they could frame their goods identification. So we were in different markets. So it could actually open the table for conversation. I recommend that as well. Don't go in there guns a-blazing and threatening legal action. Try to make it amicable and say, I'm willing to work this out. This is for certain situations. There's sometimes that it's clear that they are trying to use your mark either maliciously or recklessly, no intent for not having a license. But maybe that's an opportunity there for you. You can maybe turn that into a potential money-making opportunity. Saying, I see you're using this mark in this way. I can offer you a trademark license. Having that trademark license would bring royalties to your business. It gives you the opportunity to say, listen, I'm not trying to put a lawsuit on your table. I'm trying to work with you first. And that actually can go a long way in court as well if it gets to that point, because it shows you were trying to be amicable from the forefront. Letting them know, giving them notice that you own the trademark, providing them with an amicable resolution, either offering a trademark license if they're not operating with one, which chances are if you're writing the letter, they're not. And then at the conclusion of the letter say, if we are unable, I would give a deadline. That's important. Yes, provide like a 30-day or 14-day, depending on where they are in the world. Um, I would put, I would make sure you get some sort of delivery confirmation or something on the letter, or a read receipt if it's an email, something along those lines, so you know that they received it, and that's constructive notice to you that they received it. And I would absolutely put a deadline in the letter saying, if I don't hear something within 14 days of receipt of this notice, then I'll have to pursue legal action. And then that gives them an ultimatum, ultimately, to say, okay, like either they could ignore it and you go pursue legal action, or, maybe that shows that you're being professional and you're trying to come up with a resolution. And maybe they didn't, it's always, you never want to assume malintent from the forefront, because there are some, there are business owners, especially smaller businesses, when they're just starting out, they get an idea and they're gung-ho. Even big companies, they have an idea and they want to go with it, and then it's sometimes hard to pull the reins back and saying someone else owns this.
Right.
And that's sometimes a heartbreaker, because they have they're ready to market and they're ready to brand, but hi, sorry, I own this mark. So
I've seen it happen, and I've seen big companies come after smaller companies to shut them down as well. But I just wanted to say for the people who are watching this that this is such a big problem that most people don't have a clue. I mean, there are counterfeit perfumes that you're probably buying for people for Christmas right now that you don't even know that are counterfeit. And the reason that it's bad is that they're not regulated. So they can put anything in that perfume to make it cheaper. So you can buy it cheaper. One entrepreneur that I know tested her product and it had arsenic in it. It had lead in it. She makes sure that her products are food grade so that they cause no harm to Americans who are buying her product. But when it comes from overseas, where there's an unregulated market, you literally could be putting poison on your skin every day that gets absorbed by your skin, which is the biggest organ in your body, and causing harm to your DNA. So you don't even know, because it looks just like the actual original product. So that's why it's so important. I mean, it goes from perfumes to makeup to products. It's not just luxury handbags that we're talking about here.
Oh, yeah. And that's why that trap purchase is important. That trap purchase that I mentioned earlier, and I know it's hard, especially for a smaller business, to see where all these products are being sold, especially if it's not on the internet and it's in store. But it's almost like a pick and choose. If you see on a website, some random website that they're trying to sell, your name, say perfume, it's a great example. Buy a bottle of it, get it chemically tested, and see if it really is the authentic product. And that might be a recourse to kind of open up some red flags with the customs of that country. You can register your trademarks and your products with customs, saying this is what it's made out of, this is what's supposed to be made out of. And if you find a counterfeit product from a specific business, that's grounds, and that's actually where the criminal penalties come in. That's where, when it's endangering others, it has arsenic in it. If it's endangering others, that's where the harsher criminal penalties come in, because that's a liability. That's a product's liability and safety issue amongst consumers, and that's where the harsher criminal, for the handbags and for the more luxury and consumer goods, it's typically a monetary fine or an injunction or something that prevents. It wants to, give a deterrent, provide a deterrence for future infringement and counterfeiting. But it's products like pharmaceuticals, perfume, makeup, where they're making these products. They look the same, smell the same, taste the same, react the same, but then they're made out of products or chemicals that aren't allowed in that specific country or allowed anywhere, like arsenic and perfume, that's like insane to me. But that's what you need to do. That's the way of being proactive. And you're right. It's kind of a hard battle to win, because the world is so big and you're only in one place, and, you can't order from everywhere and test everything. And it's definitely an undertaking. But it's something I definitely recommend for places that you see your perfume being sold and you're like, where did they get this from? That's why knowing who sells your product is really important. Know where your retailers intend on selling the product. If you have a distributor's agreement, and this is going a little bit deeper in the weeds than I really wanted to go, but if you have a distributor's agreement, agree on the countries and places that they're going to sell the products to, because it's a chain. It doesn't end on where you give the product. It's then they sell it to a retailer who then sells it to consumers. So it's a really long chain that it's kind of hard for you to maintain when you're 5 degrees out. But if you provide that guidance from the get-go, or you advise, if you're working with an attorney, you advise to them, I don't want my product being sold outside of France or out of the US or Canada, or I only want to be sold in these jurisdictions. If you find it on a website that's operating out of Japan, chances are they're not authentic,
Right.
And that's where those trap purchases are really, really important for taking care of your brand.
Well, we're definitely running over our 20 minutes, but I do want to ask a few more questions because I feel like this is so important. It's not talked about enough. And when it happens, people are just flabbergasted. They don't know what to do. The first thing they think they can do is just go to their attorney, which is probably the best thing they can do. But it doesn't often work, and it doesn't work that fast because if it's international, it becomes a lot more complicated. But is there any way of reporting to customs or even a credit card company or any businesses to get these counterfeiters shut down?
So I actually took a couple of notes on this because I did a little on counterfeiting when I worked at DuPont, but I wanted to make sure I had, more detailed notes for everyone to make sure that I gave accurate and detailed information. You can register your trademark and your product, as I mentioned, with customs and the border protection. That's actually implemented by the government for protection of our consumers. So we're not allowing things in our country that is not made to our knowledge the way that we wanted them marketed. It's to protect the business and the consumer. So it's a very cost-effective process. I highly recommend if you have an attorney. If you don't have an attorney, you can do this yourself. You record your trademark and copyright registrations to block the import of these counterfeiting products. You can, once you record these trademarks, you have to provide where they're being manufactured, what if circumstances change to your products, if you update the formula, if you add something, if you change it, they will notify either you or your in-house counsel if something comes in or something goes out that is not within the parameters that you provided to them. That's a very cost-effective way to combat potential counterfeiters of your products. And you can do this, I believe, in other countries as well. The U.S. is where, obviously, we have the most control. It's where we're located. But there are ways. I would have to do some more researching on the international processes for them. The CBP, the Customs and Border Protection. The agents, you're literally educating them how to recognize these counterfeiting products. You're training them and how to look at these products at the various ports that they're located. It's basically giving you a whole team of government eyes and ears of your product. So, you can also conduct investigations and raids of, out U.S. and elsewhere to get the word out about counterfeiting goods in your country. You can work with trade groups and coalitions that are available worldwide to specifically address the common products in your industry and how to also get eyes and ears internationally. There are groups. One that I found when I was doing some research myself was the Coalition Against Counterfeiting and Piracy, because it is an international issue and it's really difficult to get the eyes and ears internationally on your product, especially if you're a small business. This is your bread and butter. It's your baby. You want to do everything you can in your power to protect it. You need to strengthen numbers. And I think if you, go by some of the cost-effective measures, and there was one more thing I wanted to mention about obtaining legal counsel as well in a cost-effective manner. But I know because we are over time,
Go ahead.
that I think would be helpful. In obtaining legal counsel, I know everyone's like, oh, attorneys are so expensive. And it depends on where you go. There's 2 recommendations I have on obtaining effective but affordable legal counsel. And this is not just even for this topic, it's for topics in general. The more traditional and conventional way is seeking a solo practitioner or a small law firm. They are a small business. They understand small businesses. They understand the needs of a small business because essentially they are one. They understand. My best friend is a solo practitioner, and I've learned so much from her about marketing and on a entrepreneurial scale because she's a solo practitioner lawyer. She understands the small business world. So they tend to have more affordable rates than large law firms. They might have a little more room to negotiate. They might have a little more room to, if you offer them follow-up business, they have a little more room because they're their own boss. They work for themselves. There's no fee rate that you get with a law firm that's very systematic. And so that's the more traditional way. The little unconventional way, but I've become a large fan of, is websites like Elance and Upwork. They are freelancer websites where I've seen hundreds, if not thousands of attorneys where you get to hire where you go. It's not you searching for the attorney. They come to you. So you post what your proposal is, what you're looking for, what your project is, your budget, and attorneys will come to you. And especially for IP, because IP is a federal practice. You can have an attorney if you're comfortable with having an attorney via Skype or having an attorney via phone. There are attorneys all over the country nationwide who look for clients, and it's their secondary portion of their business, or it's their primary portion of their business.
Right. Tell us again how to find those.
So there's these two websites who I actually have done business on myself called it's actually only on Upwork now, upwork.com.
Okay.
And it is a website it's for freelancing. Now you can use this for also non-legal things, if you need a writer or something else, software or app development, something like that. But I've used it quite frequently for, I've sought out clients for trademark help. And I've worked with nonprofits out in Oregon. I've worked in other locations, and instead of you looking on Google and finding trademark attorneys near you, you can upload your project and say, I need a trademark filed in this class. This is my budget. This is what I'm looking for. Please submit your proposal. And you'll have attorneys. You can interview people. You can still make sure you have a well-qualified and well-versed individual, but they provide, it's almost like bidding for your work. They provide proposals and compete for your work. And it ends up being a more affordable option rather than going to a law firm that would charge hourly. Or you can say, my budget is, I really don't want to spend more than $500 on the whole project. And they, sometimes that's reasonable. Sometimes it's not, depends on what it is. There's filing fees and things like that involved. But there are attorneys who are actively looking for clients in this regard. And you can develop a business relationship with these attorneys as long as you're comfortable with the Skype or phone relationship, especially for federal practice like intellectual property. It's a very cost-effective way to obtain legal counsel than going to a larger law firm.
That's awesome. Now, you mentioned it might be another site as well. You said Upwork,
I retracted that because I think Upwork bought an Elance.
Oh, I see.
So I think now most of their work, and especially all the new work, is being uploaded onto Upwork.
Gotcha.
Because I actually started on Elance and now I'm working on Upwork.
Okay.
Because I have, I work full time, but on the side, if I want to pick up extra clients, I go on Upwork and see, what do people need? Do they need a contract review? Do they need a trademark filed? And, it's people who, a lot of small businesses utilize it because it's not, you might need an attorney for one trademark, and instead of spending $700 for some, sometimes you might be able to get a more competitive rate based on the people who are filing or who are submitting their proposal to you.
And there's an idea of the difference in the rates. So $700 if I went with maybe a small law firm, but if I do this Upworks, I might get a Skype consultation and advice and get someone to help me through that. How much would that cost me?
Well, it depends on I'm going to give the typical legal answer. It depends. It depends on the project. It depends on the duration of the relationship. If it's you want an ongoing relationship, an hourly rate might be where you want to provide. But the thing about that is you can set what you want your budget to be. You can say, I don't want to, my goal for this particular project is, now I've seen people actually, or businesses really, look for, I want to hire an in-house attorney part-time as needed. This is the hourly rate I'm looking for, and because there's competition for business, you might actually get people offering a lower hourly rate to get the proposal. Now, the good thing about that is you want to make sure you interview the people. It's almost like you're in control of who you hire, and you can get a feel interview for them, where instead of you having to take time to go to office to office to office, seeing who you like, you can just take your time and interview and say, well, what could you do for me? What do you offer that other people don't? And you're in more control in this type of mechanism. So it's a little unconventional. It's definitely a newer take on legal practice. I enjoy doing it on the side as, additional experience for me. I've been able to obtain some clients on just individual projects for trademark searching, trademark filing. It enhances my practice a little bit because, I've actually transferred more into contracts law now. I still use my IP knowledge for, negotiating work product and things like that, but I still, to keep abreast of IP and copyright, I use Upwork as my ability to, and provide competitive rates for that reason, because it's, yes, for some people it's their secondary practice, some people it's their primary. They primarily get their clients on Upwork. And there's reviews. Yeah.
Great.
There's reviews.
Great advice.
Yeah. So
UPWORK.com.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. No, that's great. Well, thank you for sharing all of this information. I think it's absolutely wonderful. It's all been really helpful. One last question, because you kind of talked about this a little bit in the beginning, but what can consumers do? Just someone who just might run across some counterfeit products. Is there anything they can do to be proactive and to help in this fight?
Well, there's two versions of a customer. It depends on what kind of business you are. If you're a business-to-business consumer or company where you sell your product to other distributors, the answer is slightly different. Most of the things are the same, but your answer is slightly different in comparison to a business-to-consumer brand. So if you're a chemicals company selling to a distributor who then they sell your product, your rule is going to be a little bit different than if you're just a handbag company selling your handbags directly to consumers. But I think providing education to both is very, very important. And they can be your army of eyes and ears to make sure that they're spending the money on the correct product. And it also proves that, you care about providing an authentic product. So, I think that consumers should purchase genuinely from the manufacturers themselves. Be wary of products of special deals that you see online. Chances are they're not authentic. I see that with dresses and gowns quite frequently. You see a gown I know you understand this one completely.
I like that one.
You see these beautiful gowns that you see are $700 from the retailer specifically. And then on these other websites, they're only $50. That's probably not an authentic sale. Too good to be true deals are likely too good to be true. And those are sometimes things that if consumers really care about your brand, they should bring to your attention. And I would recommend educating, I don't think companies, big or small, do that enough. And, instead of consumers just xing out of that window saying, I don't think that's right, let the business know. Just shoot them an email saying, I saw this on this website and this doesn't seem right. And I didn't spend the money on it because it didn't sound like your product. I wish consumers cared more about that, and I think that's something that would be really helpful. And I just read what I was just saying. If there's concerns about the authenticity of a certification, let the website know. eBay and Amazon are the number one things I can think of. Is I remember they don't allow for counterfeit goods, but you have to say something about it for them to take it down. You have to say, a MAC eyeshadow palette is never going to be $5. A brand, it's those things. Understanding different colors and shades of labels, understanding the country of origin. That's a big one. The country of origin differs from where the manufacturer is located. Different shape or design can be done on the product. The tags are different. Understanding what these products look like and having that marketing scheme where it's very clear what your product looks like can help consumers recognize what's fake and what's real.
No, absolutely. The thing is, when consumers really start to care is when they order something at such a special deal and they get it and it doesn't look right. I mean, it's happened to me. I ordered something that I thought, oh, this looks like the dress that I wanted. I got it. It looked like a Halloween costume. It wasn't anywhere close to anything elegant at all. It was the flimsy material. And the other thing that I found from ordering from China is that the sizes are for fairies. They're like teeny tiny. Yeah.
Not to go too far into the left on that, but I just ordered a bridesmaid's dress for my friend's wedding, and it's 6 sizes larger than my United States size.
Wow.
6 sizes off. And I'm like, I really? And it's those things. And even though it's authentic, that I know was authentic because I ordered from an authorized reseller, you have to be careful of, it likely is too good to be true. I mean, I see it all the time on eBay. I'm thinking, ooh, that handbag's only $49.99. Right. And then you really look at it and, you see, they don't show you pictures of the actual product. That's another thing. They're using a stock photo. And that's something else that you can also provide a notification on to these resellers like on eBay or Amazon. They're using a stock photo that you own and it's your product, and they're not an authorized reseller. That's something else you can force to take down because they're using your photo and they're using your name.
And I know that now entrepreneurs that I know are actually watermarking their photos, which kind of takes away from it a bit, but they have to do that because they find that these counterfeiters are using their photos.
And when they're not watermarked, that they're not correct. And that's Google Images is great for that too. If you look for your product, look for slight different. Oh my God, I can't speak. Different spellings of that word on Google Images. And you see they're on these weird websites and you're like, well, how did this get here? Google Shopping, really utilize search engines. That is like one of the number one things, or the big sellers like eBay and Amazon and Alibaba. Alibaba is a big one. Alibaba is one where I see more counterfeiting on that website than I do on eBay or Amazon. It's interesting how you see these marks being used, and it is a large undertaking, and sometimes it's hard. You have to pick your battles wisely. If you see, a small, a reseller who's selling one version of your product, and you have another one who's selling 50, 60 listings of the same thing, you might want to pick that battle versus the guy who's selling one. And it's about picking your battles wisely. If you have the resources to go after every single one, by all means. But going after the one who's selling one is not going to damage your brand nearly as much as the person who's selling 50, 60 listings of the same thing, counterfeit or infringement, or both. It's technically both. And, you have to think, what is going to be the most damaging thing to my brand? That is the ultimate takeaway that I can recommend when you're looking at these different infringers. And, it's kind of a risk a little bit because you have to think, well, am I going to risk taking, am I allowing them to do it if I let them continue? Am I picking the right battle by only picking this person? It is a little bit of an internal struggle because you want to tell everyone to no, it's my mark. You can't do anything. But it is a costly undertaking. Chances are, if they're doing it maliciously, that a letter is not going to stop them. So you have to pick your battles as to who's doing it, how often, where they're doing it, and how detrimental it is to your brand.
Well, this is all advice for entrepreneurs who are listening. Tina, I want to thank you so much for coming on Encore. The show for entrepreneurs, they must be plus. Tina's not 50 plus, but that's she has great advice. She has the wisdom of a person that's much older, and she knows her stuff. I just want to let everyone know our next Encore will be on Monday, January 4th. We are shutting down for the holidays on January 4th, 8 p.m., not 8 a.m., but 8 p.m. with Michael McCallowitz. He will be discussing how to be a profitable entrepreneur, how to make that money. So you definitely want to listen in, and that's the whole reason we do what we do. We want to make the world a better place, but we have to So we have to learn how to make that money. So make sure you watch at that time. And follow us on Twitter at Encore Institute. Encore Book, that's an old handle at Encore Institute, and you can get all of our businesses. So thank you again, Tina. This is wonderful when we have you come back on again to talk about this more as we learn more. But I love great advice that you have, especially about work.com. That was awesome. Thank you, and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.